Hi, this is Sue Snellenberger. I'm here with Jessica Seinervane. She is our Special Ed Director and People Service Director. I chose Jessica to interview because in our school district, our Special Ed Director and our psychologist are the ones that do the testing. Special Ed teachers are told that we are to be working really hard with our students so that this gives us a little bit of break and not have to worry about testing and paperwork. So, what is your current teaching position?
So, as you said, I am the Director of Pupil Services. I oversee special ed and counseling and nursing. I am also licensed to be a school psychologist. We have another school psychologist on staff, but I do evaluations as well. Before I did this, I did teach high school ID.
Do you teach in a rural or urban district?
This is very rural.
How many other special ed teachers work in your building or within your service?
So we have 13 special ed teachers district-wide. In our primary school where we are right now, Sue is our only special ed teacher. Out in Brandon, our other elementary school, is also just one special ed teacher. Our intermediate school, which is 4th through 8th, on one side of the district has 2 special ed teachers, and our high school has 2 special education teachers, and then we have 1 speech and language pathologist.
What does your district or your school use as an overall individual achievement test?
So we have the Woodcock-Johnson, and we also have the Wechsler. I was trained on the Woodcock, so that's what I typically tend to use. Alex, our other school psych, is more into the Wechsler, so we have both.
Nice. What are your thoughts about the assessments?
I think that they are one piece of information. I think that you can't just use that for everything as an end-all be-all. You and I talked a little bit the other day about how depending upon who you're testing, there can be some bias in there based on experiences that the children have. So if there's a question in the Woodcock about camping. If they've never been camping, they may not get that question correct, and then that is a measure of their comprehension. And so does it mean they can't comprehend, or does it mean that they haven't had the experience to know what word goes in that sentence? So I think you have to be a little bit careful about looking at your results.
Does it match fairly well with what the student classroom performance is?
Not in this district. In this district, the academic rigor is very high. And so even students who are maybe that gray area or borderline look very low in the classroom. But these tests that we're talking about right now are nationally normed. And so when they come out average, it frustrates everybody because that's not necessarily an indication of how they're performing in the classroom.
What are the positives of this assessment?
It gives you information. It's, an easy way to know where they are in reading and math. I think when you add that to our district-wide assessment, the iReady, I think you have a really good overall picture of what they can do in all areas of reading and where we need to focus, if they need specialized instruction, where we need to focus that.
Are there any drawbacks on these assessments?
Again, they're nationally normed, so they may not match the performance in the classroom. And again, going back to that experience piece, there may be questions that are biased for some students, but I think, again, just keeping in mind that it's one measure, it's one piece of information in the puzzle of everything that we have.
Please tell the individual assessments that you use for reading comprehension, basic reading skills, and reading fluency.
So again, we have the Woodcock-Johnson, we have the Wechsler achievement tests. I think for younger kids that those are harder, and so then we also have the Battelle early academic test, and we have the Bracken for early childhood and really young students to look at some of those pre-academic skills.
What are your thoughts on how well these measure a child's skills in each area?
There's so much that goes into that, and as we do the testing, we're observing during testing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times that gives us really good information as well. There's a section on the Woodcock Johnson where they have to work out math problems. Well, that allows me to kind of see how they're thinking through those problems,
Okay.
which can give us information on where they might be struggling. And the same for reading. You can kind of see, some kids process out loud and they talk through it, and it gives you an idea of how they're thinking about things or how they're coming up with their answers. And sometimes that information can be even more beneficial than the actual standard score on the test.
Yeah.
So and you can see, are they really trying, or are they just saying, I don't know, and not trying? And so all of that plays into how you report out your results. I mean, I think overall, it at least shows us how they're performing in that moment.
Okay.
If they're not trying, their scores might be lower than what they're capable of, but that's probably close to what they're doing in the classroom then, right? And so then we need to figure out, is it the academics, or is it the behaviors, or is it the executive functioning skills, or why aren't they able to show what they know?
What do you feel should be do you feel there should be other similar assessments available for your use? And which ones?
For academics, I think we're pretty well covered. We also have other areas for like younger children and older children too. We can assess behaviors and executive functioning skills and cognitive functioning. But I think for academics, I think the things that we have are really good.
Please talk about any individual assessments used for special education eligibility in the area of mathematics, both calculations and problem solving.
So again, we have the Woodcock and the Wyatt both assess both of those areas. And so then we can look at our district-wide data, our classroom data, and then our standardized assessments to kind of piece together if it's the calculation or the problem solving that they're struggling with and why.
An area of individual assessment that has not seen a wealth of published norm options is written expression. What do you use for this area?
We don't do a lot in that area because of that reason. Typically, a child is not just struggling with writing, that they're also struggling with either reading or math or behaviors or whatever. And so a lot of times we will work on the reading and then also service the writing, because there aren't a lot of good measures for the writing piece.
I'm skipping that one. What are the supplement ways you assess a child's written language? Is there a way you do it here?
Yeah, so the Woodcock Johnson does have a writing section on it, which we'll do just to kind of look at, can they put a sentence together? Can they come up with ideas? Those pieces, I don't always feel like it represents their skills well, but at least it can show kind of how they're writing, what they're writing. Are they writing big, huge letters? Are they not capitalizing? Are they not punctuating? Those pieces. And then we also use a lot of classroom assessments on writing to talk about their skills in that area.
Addressing behavioral and emotional disability areas can go in many directions. Which assessments does your school district usually use for that?
So for older kids, we have the BASC, which looks at behaviors like attention, anxiety, withdrawal. We have the executive functioning rating scale, and we have the Connors, which looks at attention, anxiety, depression, all of those areas. For younger students, we have the Battelle, which looks at the areas of the significant developmental delay, which we'll go through, but it has adaptive and social skills, and that's a combination. I like the Battelle because it is a combination. So it's working with the student and observing the student. It's interviewing the teachers. It's interviewing the parents. So you're gathering all different perspectives when looking at those pieces. Especially when they're young, they can't always tell you.
Yeah. What other ways do you or your school psychologists assess EBD areas?
We track behaviors, and we have worked very hard over the last few years on our behavioral interventions. And so we're trying interventions. We're trying to figure out the why behind the behavior and what are they struggling with, that Ross Green stuff that we talk about, so that we can intervene in an area that will hopefully help eliminate some of those behaviors. And then if those are still continuing, then we can use that along with some of those tools like the basket and the brief and those to look at, which areas are they struggling in.
And what is a good test or a way to test for children with little to no verbal skills?
Again, I like the Patel because it's observation and interview.
Mm-hmm.
So if the child can't necessarily perform those activities, there are other ways to assess it. The Bracken I also like because it's receptive versus expressive. So it's show me red, show me green versus what color is this. Okay. So if they can point and show you that they have some of those skills, then it takes out that verbal piece of it. We also have a nonverbal intelligence test that we can use to assess some of those pieces too.
And when testing a child, what is one thing to keep in mind?
That the test is not the end all be all. It is one score on one day in their lives. And so making sure that while you need to have that standards-based information, you also need the classroom piece and the parent piece and the teacher piece, and you need to have that whole picture to have a really good evaluation and to really understand that student. And so these tests are just one component of a good evaluation, and to keep that in mind, that just because today they scored low on math doesn't mean that they need special education. It might just be that they had a bad day or they didn't try, and so using all of our information to look at, do they have a disability and do they require special education? Because there's 2 questions on the evaluation.
And I have one more that I did not tell you about. What is one thing you would tell people coming into the special education programs to help them as they're walking into something they've never really done before other than taking classes?
Doing the testing with somebody, like watching it, I think is really helpful. I learn by watching a lot of the time. So if I can see how it's done and then have somebody maybe watch me while I practice, I think that's a really good way to make sure that you're being consistent, because with a standardized test, there are procedures that you have to follow in order to keep it standardized. And so I think having a progression of watching somebody doing it, having somebody do it and watch you do it, and then having you do it on your own is a good way to get into that practice of doing that. Here, because we don't have a lot of staff, the school psychologist does a lot of testing. When I was a teacher, I liked doing my own testing because of the pieces we talked about. Yeah. I liked seeing how they were processing through things. I liked seeing how they thought about answers, or, sometimes there are right answers and wrong answers, and they may have given a wrong answer, so all you see on the test is wrong, but they may have had something that connected somewhere. And so I think that information is just as valuable, and you miss that piece of it. I can tell you about things that I saw while I'm testing, but I may not report out on every single thing. And so if we would ever get to a place where our caseloads are not so high and we only have one teacher per building, going back to having the teachers do some testing, I think would be beneficial, because it does give you a lot of information about the kids.
Thank you so much for doing this interview with me.
Hey, no problem.
And thank you for giving us a lot of good insight.
Yeah.